Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and to talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krall, and today I want to talk about this idea of the feminine side and answer the question, can men have a feminine side and still be manly? If you saw my series on the sacred masculine archetypes at the beginning, you heard me talk about the Anima and Animus, or masculine and feminine sides of the mind, and the yin and yang theory. And there's a link below if you haven't seen this series yet. I highly recommend it. But according to the famed psychologist Carl Jung, yes, a balanced, well-rounded man should, in a philosophical sense, have a so-called feminine side that he is in touch with, or the anima, as it is called in Jungian psychology. Now, this is not to say that there is a female part of the brain. Okay. This is just a sort of subconscious archetype, right? Or a way of talking about the mind. All right. And this is not an excuse for behaving badly in ways that women do, such as doing any of the things that I'm going to be discussing on this channel, calling them out for. This does not mean trying to be like women and supplicating to them in order to try to have sex with them, right? Or in other words, being what is commonly referred to as a mangina. And this certainly doesn't mean you should be one of those awful New Age goddess-worshipping male feminists. I mean, basically, don't go overboard with it, okay? Remember that yin is only a very small part of yang. It is a modicum, which means a small but valuable and integral part, all right? So let's talk about how much of a masculine side versus how much of a feminine side a man should have. Because I have used the term masculine polarity in a recent video, and this is because in yin and yang theory, masculinity and femininity are viewed as polarity, like the poles on a magnet, or in this case like yin and yang, which are a set of poles. However, unlike yin and yang, masculinity and femininity do not actually occur along one single pole. They each have their own pole. So to illustrate this for you, let's make some space here. Aha! Now we're getting somewhere. Now, if only I had some kind of... Oh! Alright. Now we got what we need. We need this as well. So masculine and feminine polarity are not like this. That is not what it's like. What it is like, if you are a man, boom, you have masculine polarity. Makes sense, right? And you will have this on a continuum from 0 to 100%. So, as a man, you're going to be more towards 100%. And while you could be anywhere, most men are going to be on this side. You're probably going to be somewhere on this side, from 50 to 100% masculine. Now, women, of course, would have feminine polarity and be more towards this end of 100%. Again, most women falling in the 50 to 100% range. However, while most men will fall somewhere from here to here, let's say here, they will then have some sort of feminine side to balance that, usually an equal or opposite amount, right? So they may be right here when it comes to how feminine they are, right? And women may have a masculine side. They may not be 100% feminine, right? They may have a little masculinity as well. So yes, both men and women have both male and female sides, theoretically, in Jungian psychology. And for men, the masculine side is predominant. It is generally far larger than the feminine side, which is just a modicum. And, for women, the same applies, vice versa. So the amounts and ratios of each are very much like the amounts of yin and yang, right? The yang is actually only about like 75 or 80 or so percent yang, and it has that little bit of yin in it, okay? So it's generally going to be similar ratios to that, though, of course, there are going to be men who are more masculine than others and some who are less, right? And so these things, of course, are very relative. And now this is not taking into consideration what is masculine or feminine exactly, and how we would distinguish everything we needed to into these two classes, and whose opinions would it be that we're taking into consideration here? I mean, is it your culture's memes about what men and women are supposed to be, or is it your personal opinion, or does it come from your mother and father, or the media? Because obviously we can see how there are some blurry lines here, and that the concept of masculine and feminine are a bit relative, as they will obviously vary from culture to culture. So the more in depth we talk about these concepts, the more abstract that they become, and that's kind of how the LGBTQ community and the feminist community has been able to manipulate the minds of people with this idea of it all just being a social construct, right? Which it is not, right? There's both nature and nurture. So yeah, there is some social conditioning and cultural programming influence, but there's also nature and biology. Such. But let's keep it simple and pretend that masculinity and femininity are not abstract concepts, but that we've, come up with some sort of absolute idea about what masculine and feminine means. Let's just assume that we all have an idea in our minds that we're certain of what a man is supposed to be and what he is not, and what a woman is supposed to be and what she is not. We'll just assume that we all have the same exact ideas of these things and we'd all be in agreement, right? So then you would end up with this different idea of polarity. As long as we are considering cultural influences and social conditioning and cultural programming and such, but we're also speaking philosophically about this theory. Let's say that any man, because he identifies as a man, is going to generally identify more as masculine and less as feminine, even if he is not considered manly in his culture. He will generally identify as being, again, on this far side of the spectrum, past the 50% mark in what he sees in himself as being masculine character traits, if not more, right? Some people see themselves as very masculine, even though their culture doesn't, right? And even men who are very in touch with their feminine side, and maybe even effeminate at times, maybe higher on this part of the scale than most men are, will still be more masculine than feminine, and of course more masculine than any female out there, even generally more masculine female. So that is what makes us men and separates us from women. So while these things are very relative, and there's certainly a spectrum of masculinity, and some men might be closer to 50-50 of masculine and feminine, and some might be more like 99 to 100% masculine and 0 to 1% feminine, or what you call macho men. But for every man, no matter how masculine he is, there will be some traits he possesses that some other masculine culture, or maybe even some other people in his own, will regard as feminine, right? And it shouldn't be a threat to his masculinity to experience some modicum of feminine aspects, or have some modicum of feminine traits. Right? It's certainly only natural because men have so many female influences in our lives, right? So a man should be secure enough in his masculinity to be able to accept some feminine aspects in his life and himself, and be in touch with what you call the feminine side. The denial of this is what machismo is. It's trying to seem 100% masculine and 0% feminine, because the idea of being anything but masculine is threatening to your cultural view of masculinity and makes you feel insecure and weak. This is not genuine masculinity, though. Genuine masculinity should not be threatened by femininity or anything is like that. It should be balanced by it. What being in touch with your feminine side as a man means is that you should allow yourself to have feelings and express them, and not try to bottle them up until you become mentally ill under the guise of being a traditional stoic man. Funnily enough, all the guys who promote stoicism as being unemotional seem to have never actually read a book on it, because that is not the definition. And it means giving yourself permission to do certain activities that in your culture may have been thought to be more feminine, such as cooking and cleaning, appreciating beauty in art, decorating your home, as I do, and maybe even being able to sew up your own clothes when they get torn, just like army men do, who are extremely masculine, and yet still they can sew when they rip their clothes. They sew it right back up. It's a non-issue. I mean, so how feminine can it be? And again, it just shows you how relative these things are, that an extremely masculine or even macho man would be sewing, something that is traditionally thought of to be a feminine activity. And that man may be close to 100% masculine, right? But there's still something he does that could be regarded as feminine by someone. And yet, it just makes him a more functional human being because having those feminine aspects are only healthy and balancing, okay? So it brings you into harmony mentally and spiritually and physically, theoretically speaking, again, philosophically speaking. And it means not letting insecurities get the better of you and not allowing yourself to be emasculated, but accepting all parts of yourself, right? And thus having a greater sense of self and self-esteem. And it also means doing more of what you really want to do, which is just a very alpha male attitude to have, ironically, right? So, just like yin and yang, these concepts are kind of paradoxical, and why getting caught up in them too much will just cause you to get a complex, right? And they're things you don't really need to worry about. If you are a man, if you identify as a man, you can have a feminine side, you can do some things that some people might think of as feminine, and you'll find that when you allow yourself to be more in touch with your feminine side, that it helps you to feel more secure in your masculinity, and thus will make you feel more mentally healthy, and you'll become, again, a more balanced and well-rounded person, and more self-actualized, and it will improve the quality of your life, because again, you're going to be doing more things that you want to do, right? Like if I wanted to learn how to sew and tailor myself some sick-ass suits, even though that seems like a feminine activity, I'm still going to do it. I will not feel threatened by people who say, oh, stewing, is girly or anything like that, because that's just childish thinking. That's not the way a man thinks, who's, an adult who's mature and secure in his masculinity. And when I do this so-called traditionally feminine activity, I would make it more masculine, right? So how feminine would it really be? Even if I got really into it, it would actually only be a masculine thing because of the fact that I'm doing it in a masculine style, for masculine purposes, right? And enhancing my masculinity with it. If I'm building myself some sick-ass suits that make me just look more masculine. So it's interesting, again, how relative these things are. And why you shouldn't worry about things that may seem feminine. One analogy I've used repeatedly that you may have heard from, one of the recent videos is about the color of a man's shirt and how some men are literally scared to wear colors that seem feminine, right? And I know because I've talked about fashion a lot with men, and this isn't out of the ordinary for a man to bring up, right? That he doesn't want to wear certain colors like pink and lavender, and these things seem silly to someone who is secure in their masculinity and has an emotionally healthy relationship with their gender identity and sexual orientation, right? Because that's really what these macho guys are doing when they are scared of coming off as feminine, when they're acting homophobic. It really is a sign that they are not secure in their gender identity and sexual orientation. Right? And that's why they would get really offended if you called them a fag or, called them girly, called them a pussy, whereas a man who's secure in his masculinity wouldn't. And it's important to note that doing traditionally feminine things as a man won't make you more feminine, as I said, because most likely as a man you'd be doing it in a masculine way. For instance, I cook, write, make music, and I'm very artistic. I decorate my home and do all of these artsy things in ways that are extremely masculine. All right, when I'm cooking, I almost never make dessert food or anything girly. I almost never bake, which is something I see as more of a feminine activity, because it's always been women I've dated when they say that they cook, they've been more into baking, right? And the food I make is rich, hearty, spicy, high in macros since I'm a weightlifter, and I make it in large portions because I have a very big, manly appetite. And all of these things are very different than how women cook. The way I've decorated my apartment is a mix of pinup girls, classical artwork, dark contemporary abstract artwork, some artwork me and my son made together, some from the female artists I've dated, like these here, and seashells and artifacts from cultures I've visited, some beautiful wooden handcrafted humidors that display my cigar collection, and I've got some cigar artwork in here as well, and some ornate lanterns. I love lanterns, and just making my apartment look good, and none of this feels feminine to me. I mean, there's the pinup girls. That's a different kind of feminine art. I mean, it's done for heterosexual men like me, especially ones who like to, sort of daydream nostalgically about old times and the way women used to be. But even if there is a bit of artwork in here that is somewhat feminine, like some guy was saying that these have feminine coloring or feminine seeming or whatever, it's like, okay. I like it. So, it was done by a girl. She was actually a very significant factor in my life and my journey as a MGTOW man. So even if a bit of artwork in here is somewhat feminine here and there, I'm okay with it. And another thing is poetry. I'm a poet. I'm actually going to be reciting some poetry for you in one of the next videos. And the poetry and short literature I write, you may think of poetry as being traditionally a romantic thing or, kind of effeminate, but mine is, of course, done from a male perspective, as is the short literature that I do, which is either scientific, logical, or deep and philosophical in some way. Oftentimes it's sexual. I can get very dark, even angry or violent at times. So it's nowhere near feminine enough for most of the women I've known. And the music I make as a musician is either loud and explosive percussion, or loud thrashing heavy metal like this. However, I do sometimes write some poetry that may be on the softer side and play some classical and folk acoustic guitar. You know, this isn't just a decoration, I actually play it.
My girl, don't lie to me. Tell me, where did you sleep last night? In the pines, where the sun don't ever shine. I'm shivering, oh, not through. My girl, where the hell you go? I'm going where the cold wind blows. To the pines, the sun will shine, I shiver. No, not through.
And I can sing falsetto very well. And even though these things may sound a bit girlish, I'm secure enough in my masculinity to do it. And being secure in your masculinity is what is important, because if you're avoiding activities that you see as feminine, like, you know, being creative or being emotional, God forbid, you should ask yourself why you are afraid of being feminine by doing these things, when you could just do them in your own masculine manner. And moreover, why you are not secure enough in your masculinity to do something that you see as feminine. Oftentimes when I go over to male friends' houses, the walls are bare, like just white. Being in a hospital or something, you know, the place is dirty and unkempt. The fridge is bare, yet the sink is full of dirty dishes, and it's very uncomfortable and unaccommodating for me to, you know, stay and visit with them for very long. You know, they live in that 24/7, and it makes me wonder why that is. Are they really comfortable there? They're obviously convincing themselves that this is how a male bachelor is supposed to live, and that tidying up the place and making it look nice and be more comfortable, and maybe decorating a little, would all be too feminine. But cooking for yourself and cleaning your home and decorating it to your liking, being a domestic creature, and doing things that are creative or artistic, and talking about your feelings shouldn't just be reserved for women, especially if you do not have a woman in your home to help you with such things. But even then, these are basic things that an adult man ought to be able to do for himself. You aren't a child, and you shouldn't be waiting for some woman to act like your mother and do them for you. And when you can keep a nice home and do everything for yourself in your domestic life, even tasks that were once considered traditional female roles, chores that were once considered women's work and such, you know, when you could do all of that for yourself, you'll be much better off for it. Okay, so it's not going to be making you more feminine necessarily. And when a man tries to deny any modicum of a feminine side, what he's really doing is trying to be either macho or savagely, neither of which is really masculine, but are very negative male stereotypes that actually come from a place of insecurity, and people can tell, and they aren't impressed by it. So get in touch with your feelings if you aren't. Learn to cook and clean for yourself, for your own sake, and don't be afraid to do anything that seems feminine, like going to an art gallery or reading some good old-fashioned poetry. It will actually just make you a greater, more sophisticated and refined man. So next I'm going to talk about men's feelings a little bit, and then I'm actually going to do a couple masculine poetry readings. So stay tuned for those.
That concludes this video. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that good enough for you. If you like what you heard, please click the like button, and if you feel you gained some value from this video and would like to give some back, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support helps fund me doing this work and fight the good fight for men like you. If you are ready to take the red pill and wake up from the matrix, I have the perfect book for you. The Bible of Esoteric Knowledge is a super concise, dense, info-packed philosophy textbook, written in the same verse format as the Bible, but combining multiple different, highly esoteric philosophies such as Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Shamanism, ancient paganism, and a special balance between theoretical physics and metaphysics, along with some special bonus info on the cryptic secrets of sexuality and death. This book will stimulate your intellectual philosopher's mind like no other, especially since it's a lot shorter and easier to read than most philosophy books made up entirely of run-on sentences and never-ending paragraphs, and, you know, can be quite boring and exhaustive. Full of all the most fascinating mystical secrets of the universe, Gratify your inner geek and quench your thirst for meaning with the Bible of Esoteric Knowledge. Get your copy at the link below for a special sale price today. Enlightenment has never been so easy.